Hey, podcaster. How are you? It's Dave here on the How to Podcast series. I hope you're doing well. Welcome back to the podcast. We are going to be talking about something that came through as a question from someone that I'm working with who is working on their new podcast and doing great, getting their message out into the world, recording new episodes. But they got some feedback, and it kind of took them by surprise and made them reflect, and they wanted to get my feedback on this concern that was raised by some listeners early on in their podcast, all around vocal fry and uptalk or upspeak. And they had some feedback from a listener saying that they were doing a lot of that in their podcast, and they are unsure about what that meant and how they should address it, and some thoughts around it here on the How to Podcast series. So, hey, let's talk about uptalk and vocal fry here on the How to Podcast series. Here we go. So basically, I got this information and feedback from a listener who's working on their podcast, early days, getting their show out, and they did receive feedback, which is great. We always want feedback on our podcast. We want to know how our podcast is doing and how we can do it better and how we're serving our audience. And the comment came around the idea of vocal fry and uptalk, also known as upspeak. So the question came to me was, Dave, what is it, first of all, that these people are talking about me as a host, and how do I address this so that my podcast impacts my audience in a meaningful way? So one of the things that seems to be unfairly attributed to young female voices is the idea of uptalk or upspeak. And it's not fair because it is not specifically one type of person that has uptalk. I know a lot of men who have uptalk and upspeak when they're speaking. So please, again, I want this podcast to be a podcast that encourages you, never pulls you down. Okay? That is my goal for every episode of every time you hear this podcast. I want to be here to build you up, not tear you down. So we all have that understanding. So don't think that this is only something that's only related to young women. This can be something that affects all of us. And it comes down to the fact that we're actually going to be heard on a recording by many people, and many people have opinions. And as we put our voice into the world, there are going to be people who come at us because they're that type of people who want to attack. But there's also people who come to us and say, this is what I'm hearing, and I just wanted to let you know that this is what's happening for me as a listener. So don't be super critical about your voice when you get this type of feedback. But there's some things to be aware of when we talk about uptalk and vocal fry. So there's two different things. So let's focus on uptalk, upspeak, and why this is something that maybe your listeners are tuned into or has become obvious to them, that makes them want to reach out and just say, hey, this is what I'm hearing as a listener, and I just wanted to let you know that's what we're experiencing as a listener. So basically, in the basic form of what upspeak and uptalk is, it's just there's a sense possibly for listeners that as a host, when we use upspeak and uptalk, that we sound a little less sure of ourselves, a little less confident in our content, and that we're searching for something that we don't know what's next. So it's almost like we're going up with our voices where we should be going maybe down. So everything becomes a question. So it kind of sounds like everything's a question instead of everything's a question. Do you see that? So I was going to the store, and when I went to the store, I wanted to buy some food instead of I went to the store and I wanted to buy some food. Do you see what I mean? Our voices go up frequently where we could be going down with the inflection of our voice, which for some listeners could make them feel like you as a host are probably not as organized, put together, and confident about your topic, because it feels like you're searching for the next thing to say, possibly, as they hear you speak. Again, nothing critical here. Just that is feedback that's come back to this one specific person that I'm working with. And by no means am I saying that I, Dave, am a perfect example, because I use Uptalk. I use Upspeak when I'm speaking. Especially I find it more often when I have guests, because I'm working through questions in my mind, keeping the podcast recording going, and I will fall victim to this, and I'll listen back to it going, I don't sound as sure of myself in the moment, and I tend to go up where I could go down with the inflection of my voice. So I found this really cool clip. Mike Myers, famous actor, Austin Powers and all that. He is from Canada, so there you go. We'll make sure everyone knows that he's Canadian. He explained the Canadian way that we talk here in Canada, and it involves uptalk, upspeak. And I really loved how he shared this on a late night TV show, but he broke down how Canadians talk, and it makes me laugh, but it also illustrates what uptalk, upspeak sounds like in a non-threatening, funny way. So I wanted to play the clip of Mike explaining how Canadians use our speech to signal when it's your turn to speak and when it's our turn to speak here in Canada. So hope you enjoy this, and I'll give you a little sense of what upspeak, uptalk sounds like in an exaggerated form. So here's Mike.
You know, Canadians have this rise at the end, so every statement sounds like a question. So even if it's snowing, obviously they'll go, it's snowing? And it's kind of like, linguistically, it's called the Canadian rise, which is, I'm going to talk, then it goes down. And that means it's your turn to talk. So it's like, the other day, a guy came up to me, and he was really mad. Now it's your turn to talk because I went down. And that's the accent for Wayne.
So now you know how Wayne Campbell was voiced there for all those Wayne's World shows. Love that. And Wayne Campbell, last name, good name, right? So Mike explains that upspeak. So you can kind of hear it, right? When you talk, it's like that. And I just did it. So again, I would want everyone listening, if you're thinking, Dave, this is a really touchy thing because I do it a lot, or I'm completely unaware of this, and now I'm getting feedback that maybe I should look at this and think about this more. Again, realize this is not just limited to one specific person or one group of people. Anyone can do upspeak. So the one thing I would encourage you when you're recording your episodes, if you find that you do this on a regular basis and it's something that you want to address, a little bit of just understanding that is something you do on a regular basis. When you listen back to your shows, when you get feedback from listeners, is remember, let's go back to episode 76, that if someone has a problem with you, you are, to some degree, part of the problem. And we can take this feedback that we use upspeak, uptalk, maybe we use it too much. We can dismiss that feedback and continue. We can obsess over it and drive us crazy in our editing and how we do our recordings, and then we get super focused on it. Or we can have a healthy balance to this feedback and say, maybe I do do this too often, and maybe I can address it. So the one thing I think we just need to use punctuation in our speech so that we actually have more periods at the end of our sentences or statements and less question marks. And knowing that when we get to the end of our statement, that we're not going to go up, but we're going to go down as we're speaking. And if we're conscious of that and we're thinking of that as we're recording, maybe we can reduce the overall amount of upspeak and uptalk that we do on a regular basis in our shows. Obviously, upspeak is required when we have a question. So if we're trying to figure out what we're going to have for dinner, for us around here, it's usually pizza. So I'm going to ask Jen, my wife, hey, are we going to have pizza tonight? Do you want pizza? It's right there in the question. It's right there. So are you done with that? Right? It's something we use all the time. Have you seen my shoes? We go up, right? So it's something we need. But when we use it when there's no question, it can become problematic. It kind of makes us sound like we're asking a question, but we're not. And the listener actually will start to misunderstand the intent of our content. And I guess the big downside of using upspeak and uptalk is that we don't sound as authoritative or decisive. And that upward tilt makes it sound like we're looking for some sort of approval, some sort of, yeah, I agree. And it kind of feels like we're giving off a little bit of mixed messages. Again, I do this. So, okay. And it makes us sound like we're not done speaking. That's the one part that's hard in editing. When you're editing for someone else that you don't really know, it makes it difficult to know when you're done and the next person is going to speak. And when you're interviewing, if you use a lot of upspeak and uptalk, your guest can get a little distracted and not know when it's their turn to speak. So when you do what Mike Myers was saying, when we ask the questions and we do the thing and we do all this stuff and then we go down. When we go down, it's like we've completed our thought, we're finished, everything's done, finished, and there's a period at the end of our comment or content, which then opens the door for a new topic or a response and invites the next person to speak. So just understand that question at the end doesn't give finality to a thought in some cases. Because younger people are more often in positions where they need approval from those around them. They're more likely to be uncertain in their position and possibly, in a lot of cases, unfortunately, a lower rank when they're sitting in a room full of experts. As younger people in organizations, they typically use upspeak more often, and it's kind of worked its way into our regular everyday vocabulary. I guess the big thing to consider when we talk about upspeak and uptalk is that we should use it when it's meaningful and appropriate to avoid sending off mixed messages to our audience and to instill confidence in the topic and the content and our preparation for our podcast that we come across as knowing our content and we can deliver it in a way that our audience feels like they're surrounded by a big hug because we feel confident we express that in how we use the words that we speak into our microphones. So by listening to this and you're thinking, well, maybe I do use a little bit too much upspeak in my day-to-day or in my recordings, try focusing on your overall intention of what you're trying to say. Are you looking for approval? Are you looking to ask a question? Or are you looking to make a statement? There's a difference. So if you use upspeak, whether you're asking a question or making a statement, that's the mixed message that people get. Focus on speaking in sentences that have a declaration to them. Visualize a period at the end of each of your sentences and speak slowly, driving energy and tone towards the completion of your thought. And then when you get to the end of your thought, when you're end of your comment, then do a slight drop in the pitch of your voice and try to do the exact opposite of going up, go down. And practice this. Go on to your podcast recording platform, wherever you record. I'm using Audacity. It's a free software right now. And practice. Say something where you would naturally go up in pitch and do the exact opposite and try it. It's like a new muscle that you need to exercise. For some people, it's just a matter of running out of air, where they talk for a long time on one big gulp of air, and by the time they run out of air, their voices just seem to get higher and higher and higher, and the pitch is going up because they've run out of air. So plan out your breathing, plan out your speaking voice, put some thought into how you present yourself. And maybe this isn't a big deal. Like I said, I do this in my own recordings. But now that I've been working through this answer and creating this episode, I'm hearing it in a lot of different places. So don't be afraid of Upspeak. Use it as a tool. But I think somebody said, if when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? If you're using Upspeak all the time because that's just what you do, then just be aware of it. And when your listening audience reaches out to you and says, hey, Dave, you do a lot of Upspeak, a lot of Uptalk, just want to let you know, that's an indication. A, someone reached out to you and gave you feedback, and B, maybe there's something there. Again, if someone has a problem with you, you're somewhat part of the problem. So take it for what it is. Again, don't feel judged. You're going to hear, if you listen back to my episodes and going forward, you're going to hear me use Upspeak, but I'm learning, I'm aware of it. And again, it's not just one group of people that does this. Anyone can do it, and you've probably done it yourself. The other thing is vocal fry. Again, not specifically young females that do this, but anyone can do this. And basically, if you just slow down your voice, you start to get very, some notable voices that would be associated with vocal fry would be the Kardashian family. When they speak, Britney Spears would throw it into her music. It's interesting because it was once considered a speech disorder, apparently, as I'm going through my research, but it's become more of a language fad that's pretty popular right now. It's basically just a low staccato vibration during speech, where the fluttering of our vocal cords, which is when we're talking normally, they vibrate really quickly, which makes that seamless singing melody type voice. But as you slow down the vibration of your vocal cords, you start to get that kind of sound that comes near the end while we're talking at the end of our sentences. And yet again, I don't want to inflict upon you the fear that this might be something that you do quite often, but you need to remember how listeners listen to our show. For the most part, people have in-ear earbuds or headphones or some way where you're in their head speaking. And when vocal fry is very prevalent, after a while it can be, for some listeners, can be tiresome. So listen with new ears. Ask your community, ask your friends or your listeners to give you that feedback. And again, if someone reaches out and says, Dave, you really got a lot of vocal fry going on there, at least you'll understand what it is. And again, I think it just helps to kind of get an example. I'm just to put it in there so you can hear some vocal fry and understand. So here's a little clip of someone using vocal fry, and it'll give you that sense of what I'm talking about.
What can I get you?
I'd like a large coffee.
Okay, so hot coffee.
Hot coffee.
Okay, room for cream.
Totally leave room for cream.
Why are you talking like that?
Why are you talking like that?
Because this is my voice.
This is my voice.
Excuse me. Some of us would like to order.
So again, that's an exaggerated example just to illustrate what we're talking about. And again, if you're like, Dave, that's how I talk, then that's how you talk. Then there you go. Then that's you. So can you change you? Yeah. Do you need to? Maybe not. But if someone's reaching out to you saying that there's something that they notice about your podcast, about your presentation, is that it's there on a consistent basis. Remember, your listeners are listening through earbuds and you're in their head. And maybe it's something that you can work on. If you use Upspeak and vocal fry, does that mean you can't have a podcast? No, does not mean that at all. It's just, is there areas that we can all work on in who we are and how we present ourselves to the public? I have a ton of things that I need to work on. I'm aware of many of them, and I'm unaware of also many of them that I haven't heard yet that I really need to work on. So if there's something that I do on my podcast that you're like, Dave, yeah, maybe you need to work on this, I would love to hear it. howtopodcast.ca, and let me know as we continue to put ourselves out there into the world, sharing our voices, sharing our message, recording on the microphone. We just need to be aware of what we do and what is our natural sound. And if there's areas that we can improve on, if there's something that we can do that resonates with our audience, I think all of us can agree that there's something that we can improve on and we need to be aware of. So I know I say the word so too much, so I just did it there. Focus on the things that you can control. Focus on the things that you think you could do better. And if you're saying, Dave, I use Upspeak, Dave, I use vocal fry is who I am, it's the sound of my voice naturally, something I have never addressed before, then don't let this episode be something that makes you worry. Don't let this episode be something that gives you stress. But if your audience reaches out to you and gives you feedback, I wanted you to have something that you can have as an example of Upspeak with Mike Myers that I shared earlier and vocal fry, just so you have an idea of what it sounds like. So when someone reaches out to you and says that they hear this in your voice, at least you have an understanding of what they're trying to communicate back to you. What you do with that information is yours to do with how you wish. I'm not here to tell you either way that you should fix it. Do you need to fix it? No. But if someone's reaching out to you and giving that feedback, you need to have some source and some plan of what you're going to do with that information. So if you're looking for help with your podcast, if you're looking for maybe some advice on your speaking voice or your presentation skills, you want to level up, you want to work on things. Maybe you have crutch words. Maybe you use the word ums and ahs too much. There are ways that we can work together and get some feedback on your podcast and on your speaking voice. I would love to be there to help you with that. Let me know if I can do that with you. And I would love to be there as a support for you. So when you get feedback from your audience, thank them. And then look in the mirror, listen to your podcast, through their lens, through their ears, their opinions. And if there's something you can work on, great. And if it's something that you can't do right now, then thank them for their feedback as always, and keep recording, keep moving forward. You're an amazing podcaster. You're doing great things. And the biggest and most important thing about your podcast is you, your uniqueness, what makes you you, what you bring to the mic. Show up for your audience on a consistent basis and improve where you can. Take feedback, do with it what you will, but keep growing as a person. Keep growing as a podcaster. You got this. Okay? You have this. And you're doing great things, many great things to come. howtopodcast.ca would love to help you any way that I can. And I hope you get the intent and the heart behind this episode. Is I want to encourage you that when you get that kind of feedback, you know what to do with it. Okay? That was my intent for this. Moving forward, many great things to come up here on the How to Podcast series. And we're going to get deeper and help you improve your show, episode by episode. Great feedback, lots of great responses, and listenership around the world. Hello to you globally. Thank you for being part of the podcast. Catch you on the next episode. Thank you for being here. Keep podcasting.